Some warriors fight for power, others fight for duty. Some fight for vengeance. But there are a rare few who fight for something far greater, something deeper, something primal. They fight because they have no other choice, because the galaxy has left them with nothing but the will to survive. That is what makes a warrior truly dangerous. And no duo in Star Wars embodied that more than Darth Maul and Savage Opress. Their story was not one of friendship, not one of honor, not one of hope. It was built on pain, on betrayal, on loss. They were not allies by choice. They were not partners by fate. They were brothers in blood, forged in suffering, and bound by the cruel hands of destiny. They were not meant to succeed. They were not meant to rise, but against all odds, they did. And the galaxy was never the same again. When they fought, they were a force of nature. A storm of destruction. Maul's calculated precision and Savage's raw power created something terrifying, something unstoppable. They were not Jedi, they were not Sith. They carved their own path, one paved in fire and vengeance. And yet for all their power, for all their victories, their story was never about conquest. It was about survival. About two outcasts fighting against a galaxy that never gave them a chance. And that is what makes them the greatest duo in Star Wars. Not because they won, not because they ruled, but because they stood together when no one else would. Because their bond one built on shared pain and unbreakable will was something no other characters had. They were not just warriors. They were not just brothers. They were survivors in a world that wanted them dead. And in Star Wars, there is nothing more compelling than a survivor. This is their story. A story of power. A story of tragedy. A story of two brothers who fought against fate itself. And if you think you know everything about Maul and Savage, think again. Because their story is not just about lightsabers and war. It is about what happens when the galaxy turns its back on you, and how far you are willing to go to fight back. Star Wars has given us many duos, masters and apprentices, friends turned enemies, siblings separated by fate. But none of them, none, come close to Maul and Savage. They were more than a partnership, more than a team. They were bound by blood, connected by suffering, and driven by a rage that only they could understand. Savage was never supposed to be Maul's apprentice. He was forced into power, twisted into a monster, a weapon. But when he found his broken brother, he did not leave him. He did not run. He carried him. He brought him back. And that moment, when Savage lifted Maul from the wreckage of his mind, is when their story truly began. Maul, for all his hatred, all his pain, never saw Savage as just a tool. He trained him. He guided him. He showed him the ways of the Sith, but there was something else. A connection deeper than master and apprentice. They were not bound by manipulation. They were bound by survival. By a galaxy that had turned its back on them. That is what made them so unique. Every other duo in Star Wars was fighting for something greater. The Jedi, the Sith, the Republic, the Empire, but Maul and Savage. They were fighting for each other. That was all they had. That was all they ever had. Power is a strange thing. Some warriors wield it with precision, others with raw fury. Maul and Savage represented both. One was a tactician, the other was a beast. And together, they were an unstoppable force. Wherever they went, destruction followed. It was not just their power, it was the way they used it. Maul was a master of the blade. Every strike calculated, every movement efficient. He did not waste energy. He did not fight with emotion. He fought with purpose. Every attack was a lesson. Every duel a test he had learned from the best. He had suffered under the greatest. And that made him deadly. Savage was different. He did not fight with grace. He fought with strength. He crushed. He overpowered. He did not outthink his enemies. He overwhelmed them. His rage was his weapon. His fury, his armor. And while Maul was the storm, Savage was the thunder that followed. One brought destruction. The other, devastation. That balance is what made them the greatest. There were two extremes, yet they complemented each other perfectly. No other duo in Star Wars had that kind of synergy. No other duo could match their raw power. And no other duo left such a lasting impact in such a short time. Fear is what controls most warriors. Even the greatest hesitate. Even the strongest have doubts. But Maul and Savage, they feared nothing. Not Jedi, not Sith, not death itself. They walked into battle, knowing they were outnumbered, outmatched, and they fought anyway. Because to them, fear was just another enemy to conquer. When they stormed the Temple of the Night Sisters, they faced an army of undead warriors. Most would have fled. They charged forward. When they stood before Darth Sidious, they knew they could not win, but they fought anyway. Because they had spent their entire lives fighting. Because they knew nothing else. Savage did not cower before his enemies. He attacked. He roared. He faced opponents that should have crushed him. Yet he never backed down. And Maul was the same. He stood before legends and challenged them. He faced the greatest warriors in the galaxy and refused to kneel. That is what set them apart. They did not just fight for victory. They fought because that was who they were. They fought because they knew that if they ever stopped, if they ever hesitated, it would be over. And even in their final battles, when defeat was certain, they did not run, because running was never an option. As much as they fought, as much as they conquered, Maul and Savage were doomed from the start. They were never meant to win. The galaxy was not made for warriors like them. They had no place among the Sith, no place among the Jedi. They were outcasts. And in Star Wars, outcasts do not get happy endings. Savage was never supposed to live long. He was created to be a weapon, and weapons are meant to be discarded. But he found something greater than power. He found a brother, a purpose, and that made his end all the more painful. To fight so hard, to rise so high, only to fall so suddenly. It was cruel, but that is what Star Wars does best. Maul was no stranger to loss. He had lost everything before. His master, his future, his revenge. But losing Savage, that was different. That was not part of the plan. He was used to anger. He was used to hate. But when Savage died in his arms, something else happened. Something unexpected. He grieved. He was not just a Sith Lord in that moment. He was a brother. And that is what made it so tragic. They were not like other Star Wars duos. They were not two warriors who came together by fate. They were not allies bound by loyalty. They were survivors, fighters, brothers. And in the end, they lost. Because in this galaxy, no matter how powerful you are, no matter how much you fight, the story always ends in tragedy. There will never be another duo like Maul and Savage. Not because others have not fought side by side. Not because others have not shared bonds of blood. But because no other duo fought with such desperation. No other duo was built on nothing but survival. And that is what made them the greatest. Every other partnership in Star Wars had something to fight for. A cause, a belief, a future. But Maul and Savage had none of that. They fought because that was the only thing they knew. They had no home, no allies, no legacy, just each other. And that made them more dangerous than anyone. They did not fight for a throne. They did not fight for the Sith. They fought for something far more primal. They fought to exist. And in a galaxy that had abandoned them, that made them unstoppable. Because when you have nothing to lose, you become the most dangerous warrior of all. That is why no other duo will ever compare. Not because Maul and Savage were the strongest, not because they were the most skilled, but because their bond, one built on pain, suffering, and survival, was something no other characters could ever truly understand. Their story ended in tragedy, but their impact, their influence, that remains. Because Maul and Savage did not just fight, they changed the game. They showed what it meant to carve your own path, what it meant to fight, even when the odds were against you, what it meant to survive. Maul did not stop after Savage's death. He carried that pain, that rage. He never let it go. And that is why he is one of the greatest characters in Star Wars, because he was not just a villain. He was not just a Sith. He was a man who had lost everything. And yet, he kept going. He never let the galaxy break him. Savage may not have lived as long, but his presence was felt. His story was not just one of power, but of growth. He was created to be a mindless warrior. But in the end, he became something more. He became a brother. And in a way, that made his journey more meaningful than most. The best duos are not the ones who win. They are the ones who fight. They are the ones who stand against the galaxy and refuse to fall. And Maul and Savage, they were the best. Not because they conquered, not because they ruled, but because, against all odds, they never stopped fighting. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to subscribe to Critical Analysis Hub for deep dives into the Star Wars movies, and check out Critical Analysis Hub Plus for case studies on Star Wars shows. Also, if you want to rep the fandom in style, check out the bio for awesome Star Wars Legos and Funko Pops. May the Force be with you. I'll see you in the next one.